Kansas Territory, July 1871. The corn stalks were tall and thick, rustling in the hot breeze as Isaac Merritt swung down from his horse, boots crunching dry soil, rifle slung across his back. He had not expected to find anything unusual on this ride, just checking the eastern fence line after the morning storm, but the crying had stopped him cold. A thin, sharp wail, wrong for any animal he knew. Too soft, too human. He pushed through the stalks, hand brushing leaves heavy with summer heat. Then he saw her, wrapped in a faded quilt, tucked into a shallow hollow between two rows lay a baby. A girl, no more than a few months old. Round cheeks flushed from the sun, fists clenched, tears drying in tracks on her face. "Jesus," Isaac muttered, dropping to his knees. He reached out slow, his calloused hand brushing hers. She grabbed hold of his finger tight. Beneath her, folded and pinned with a rusted brooch, was a note. The handwriting was slanted and rushed. "Please raise her as yours. Her name is Lottie. She deserves better than I can give. Please." No signature, no clue as to where she had come from. Isaac looked around. Empty fields, no horses, no wagon tracks, nothing but the wind. He swallowed hard, heart thudding. Then he gathered the baby into his arms, holding her close against his chest. "All right, little one," he said quietly. "Looks like it is just you and me now." The porch boards creaked under his boots as he stepped up to the house, Lottie snug against his chest in the quilt. The ranch house was plain, just 2 rooms and a small lean-to kitchen, but it was clean and solid. His horse, Dust, stood tied near the barn, flicking flies from his flank. Inside, it smelled like coffee and saddle soap. Isaac laid Lottie down gently on the bed and took a breath. He had not held a baby since his sister's boy, 10 years back. She was so small it made him feel huge and clumsy. He lit the lamp, then set to work. He boiled water, cleaned a bottle his late mother had left behind with the old baby things in the chest, and fed Lottie with careful hands. She fussed but drank, her eyes watching him, wide and dark like a storm coming in. The note burned in his pocket. 2 days later, he rode into town for supplies: formula, cloth, anything he thought a baby might need. Folks stared, word traveled fast. A baby in Isaac Merritt's arms. That alone was enough to stir the whole county. At the general store, he stepped inside, Lottie in a sling across his chest. The place smelled of flour and new leather. Behind the counter stood a woman he did not recognize. She was tall, with dark auburn hair pinned in a loose twist, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her eyes, sharper than most, landed on the baby first, then on him. "You are Isaac Merritt," she said. Her voice was warm, low. "The rancher out by Miller Creek," he nodded. "That is right. I am Kora Vance. I just took over for my uncle. He fell off the roof and broke his leg clean through." Isaac adjusted Lottie's sling. "Sorry to hear that." Kora stepped around the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. "What can I help you with?" He hesitated. "Baby things. Formula, cloth. She was left out near my fields." Kora's face softened. "Left," he nodded once. "With a note. Said her name is Lottie. Asked me to raise her." She looked at him, really looked. Then she reached out and brushed Lottie's cheek. "You are doing it." "I reckon I am." Kora smiled, small and sure. "Good. Let me help you get what you need." That evening, as dusk settled over the prairie and the crickets started up, Isaac sat on the porch with Lottie asleep on his chest. The rocking chair creaked beneath him. He watched the sky darken, stars beginning to show. He had not expected this. Not any of it. But when he looked down at her tiny face, peaceful now, he felt something shift inside his chest. Something steady. Something that felt like a beginning. Kora showed up the next morning. "I brought more bottles," she said, holding up a basket, "and some salve." Her skin looked a bit chapped yesterday. Isaac blinked. "Thank you." She stepped inside like she had always belonged there. You looked like you could use the help. Over the next week, Kora came often. She taught Isaac how to hold Lottie better, how to soothe her when she fussed, how to wash the cloth diapers without leaving soap in them. She never talked down to him, never questioned his decision to keep the baby. One afternoon he found her in the kitchen, bouncing Lottie in her arms while singing softly. She turned at the sound of his boots. "She has your eyes," Kora said. Isaac leaned against the doorframe. "That's so. Not by blood, maybe. But she already looks at you like you are her whole world." He looked at Kora then. At the way the light framed her face, the way her arms moved gently with the baby, something in his chest tightened again, but not in fear. It was something warmer, something he had not felt in a long, long time. Kora started staying longer. She began cooking dinner when she came, laughing softly at Isaac's attempts to help. They ate together at the table, Lottie cooing nearby. The house no longer felt so quiet or so empty. One night, after the dishes were done and the sun had dipped below the horizon, Kora stepped onto the porch beside him. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. "She is lucky you found her," Kora said. Isaac turned to her. "I think maybe I was the lucky one." She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes searched his face and her voice came quieter than before. "I lost a child once, years ago. Not mine, not by blood, but I loved him like he was. I was working for a family in Missouri. The boy got sick. There was nothing we could do." Isaac did not speak. He just reached out slowly, gently, and covered her hand with his. Kora leaned into him, her shoulder brushing his. "You are doing right by her, Isaac." He looked down at her, heart thudding. "I am trying. But I do not want to do it alone." She met his eyes. "You are not." And in that moment, with Lottie sleeping safe inside and the summer stars spread wide above them, something shifted between them. Something quiet, something certain. The August heat pressed down like a heavy hand as days stretched long and slow, stitched together by the quiet rhythms of care. Isaac rose before the sun, feeding the chickens and hauling water while Kora tended to Lottie, who had begun to recognize their voices and reach for their faces with curious, grasping fingers. Kora's presence had become as regular as the morning wind. She brought with her not just help, but ease, a way of moving through the house like it had always held the shape of her footsteps. She never asked for thanks, and Isaac never offered it aloud, though he felt it in the way he sat straighter when she walked in, as if the air shifted with her arrival. One afternoon, while a storm whispered in the western sky, Kora stood at the table cutting muslin into strips. Isaac watched from the doorway, his shirt damp from fence work, dirt drying on his forearms. "You always working at something," he said, tilting his head toward the fabric. "I like my hands busy," she replied, brushing a curl from her temple with the back of her wrist. "Idle time makes my heart wander places I don't need it to." He nodded, stepping inside to wash up. "You miss Missouri," she considered that. "Parts of it, mostly the trees." "I used to walk old river paths when things got too loud indoors." "You lived in town, close enough." "Governess for a banker's brother. 2 girls and that boy I mentioned," she said, her voice steady. Isaac rinsed his hands in the basin, the water turning pale brown. "How long were you there?" "3 years. Left after." "Well, after," she said, folding a strip of cloth over her palm. "Wound up in Wichita for a while, then here. Seems a long way to come." "I didn't mean to stay," she said, glancing toward the cradle. "But then your girl showed up. She ain't mine by blood, she is by choice. That counts more." The wind stirred the curtains. Isaac dried his hands and leaned against the counter, watching her edge each strip into a neat stack. "You ever think about starting over?" he asked. She didn't look up. "I used to. Thought maybe I'd find someone who wanted a ready-made family, but most men don't know how to look past what they've lost." Isaac's voice came low. "I ain't most men." "No," she said, smiling faintly, still focused on her task. "You're not." Outside, the first low roll of thunder echoed across the prairie. Later that night, after Lottie had been laid down and the storm passed without much fight, Kora sat sewing near the hearth. Isaac read from a worn almanac, tracing weather signs with his finger. The only sounds were the pop of the fire and Lottie's small breaths from her cradle nearby. "You ever think she'll ask?" Kora asked, not looking up. "About where she came from," Kora nodded. Isaac folded the book across his knee. "I reckon so. What will you tell her?" "I'll tell her her mother gave her a chance, that she had to walk away so Lottie could walk forward." Kora's needle paused in midair. "That's kind. She deserves kind." Kora laid her sewing aside. "You do too." He looked at her, and something passed between them, quiet but certain, like fence wire pulled tight and true. "I don't know what this is between us," he said, voice low. "It doesn't need naming," she said. "But it's here." He nodded, and for a long while they sat without speaking, the fire settling low behind the grate. The next morning, Isaac found her in the barn, brushing down the mule. She wore his old hat, too big for her, brim tipped low. "You planning to steal that?" he asked. "Thought I'd earn it first," she said, glancing over her shoulder. He stepped closer, brushing hay from her sleeve. "You already have." She turned toward him, eyes meeting his. Then her hand came to his chest, fingers curled lightly in his shirt. "I never thought I'd feel steady again," she said. "But this place, this girl, you..." He caught her hand, pressing it flat to his chest. "I ain't going anywhere." Kora leaned in, and the space between them vanished. Their kiss was quiet, certain, like the first note of a song long overdue. When they pulled apart, she smiled, not out of surprise, but out of surety. He kissed her again, slower this time, and the barn seemed to exhale around them. Lottie's cry rose faintly from the house, and Kora laughed soft against his shoulder. "Back to it," she said. Isaac took her hand. "Come on then. Let's go see our girl." By mid-September, the prairie began to dry out, the wind carrying the scent of brittle grass and pressed earth. The fields around Isaac's land faded from green to gold, and the sun dipped earlier each evening. Kora had unpacked her things into the spare room without ceremony, her decision as quiet and firm as the rest of her. No words had been needed. Her place in the house had grown as naturally as the roots of a cottonwood near water. On a Wednesday morning, Isaac finished mucking the stalls and found Kora out behind the barn with Lottie propped on her hip, showing her the chickens. The baby's arms flailed with delight as they clucked and scratched. "She's got a strong grip," Kora said, holding out her wrist where Lottie had latched on earlier. "Nearly pulled the button clean off my cuff." Isaac took the girl from her arms and hoisted her up. "She'll be swinging a hammer before she's 2. I hope not." "Let her keep soft hands a while longer." He brushed his thumb across the baby's cheek. "You ever think about what you want for her?" "I think about what I want her not to have. No hunger, no cold nights, no wondering if she's wanted." Isaac adjusted Lottie's bonnet as a breeze picked up. "She won't ever have to wonder." Kora's gaze softened, then shifted toward the distant tree line. "I've been thinking about filing a school permit." Isaac raised an eyebrow. "You'd teach?" "There's 8 children east of the river without one proper lesson between them. Closest school's 3 hours by wagon, and the teacher there breaks more slates than he fills." Isaac looked toward the hills. "You'd have to deal with folks breathing down your neck." "I've dealt with worse. Besides, I've got you to haul the desks." He grinned, just a flicker. "Fair trade." That Sunday, they rode out to the Barlow's place, where a dozen families gathered for dinner under the walnut trees. Kora wore a cream dress Isaac hadn't seen before, simple but with a bit of embroidery at the cuffs. Lottie was bundled in a calico wrap, her hair beginning to curl at the edges. As they dismounted, Mrs. Barlow approached with a raised brow. "Heard you two were playing house." Kora met her gaze without so much as a flinch. "We're raising a child. That's more than play, Mrs. Barlow's eyes dropped to Lottie. "She yours." "She is now," Isaac said, steady as stone. Later, while the men smoked near the fence line and the women tended to pies cooling on the porch, Kora stood beside Isaac beneath the shade of a cottonwood. "Didn't expect you to answer for me like that," she said. "You shouldn't have to," he said. "Not when you've done more for Lottie than most folks do for their own." Kora tilted her head toward him. "You always speak that plain, only when it counts." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above them. Isaac reached for her hand, rough from work but warm. "Mrs. Barlow asked me afterward if we were planning to marry," Kora said. Isaac didn't flinch. "What you say?" "I said I wasn't in the habit of making promises without being asked." He turned to face her fully, eyes steady. "Then I'll ask." Kora's breath caught, but she didn't look away. "You sure?" "I've never been more." She squeezed his hand. "Then yes." No one cheered. No one clapped. But something passed between them, quiet, binding, and true. That night, as they rode home with Lottie sleeping between them, the prairie stretched out beneath a sky full of stars. Isaac reached over and took Kora's hand again, lacing their fingers. Behind them, the wind carried the sound of crickets. Ahead, the house waited, warm with lamplight and the smell of home. And for the first time in a long while, nothing felt missing. The wedding was held quietly, just past first frost, when the cottonwoods along Miller Creek had dropped the last of their leaves, and the sky settled into a pale, untroubled gray. Reverend Lyle came out from town, hitching his rig behind the house while Kora laid out a clean tablecloth and Lottie dozed in the rocker. There were no guests but the Barlows, who brought a dish of stewed apples, and Tom Weller, who'd once served with Isaac and now ran cattle on the north stretch. He handed off a wrapped parcel without ceremony and muttered something about warm winters before settling under the eaves with a mug of coffee. Kora wore a soft blue dress she'd sewn herself, hem brushing her boots, hair pinned with care but no ornament. Isaac had trimmed his beard that morning and wore the same coat he'd buried his father in, the stitching at one shoulder barely visible. They stood under the porch beams while the wind whispered through the dry grass, and the Reverend read from the small book he kept tucked in his coat. When it was done, Kora reached for Lottie first, lifting her from the cradle with care. Isaac laid his hand over hers, and the three of them stood together as the last light caught the tops of the fence posts. That night, after the others had gone and the lamp was turned low, Isaac sat at the edge of the bed, boots off, shirt sleeves rolled. Kora stood at the window, arms crossed loosely, watching the moon rise through the bare limbs of the elm by the barn. "You thinking of Missouri?" he asked. "No," she said. "I'm thinking of spring. We'll need to mend the coop if the hens are going to brood again." He leaned back on his elbows. "I can cut new slats next week." She turned to him, her eyes steady. "We could build on." He blinked at her. "You mean the house? We've got room enough for now, but if we mean to keep others here someday, maybe another child or someone passing through who needs a place, it'd be good to have space ready." Isaac stood, crossing to her. "You truly want that?" "I do." He touched her wrist, the place just above her pulse. "Then we'll start drawing it out tomorrow." They slept that night with Lottie tucked in her cradle by the hearth, the fire bank covered, the wind low. Kora curled into Isaac's side, and for the first time since he'd found that quilt-wrapped bundle in the cornfield, he didn't feel like the world could shift out from under him. Everything he needed was right there, breathing soft beside him. Winter came hard that year. The first snow stuck before December, and the wind off the hills carried a sharpness that worked its way through the cracks in the walls. Isaac kept a fire going around the clock, and Kora boiled linens to dry by the stove to keep the air from going dry. Lottie took her first steps in thick socks across the kitchen floor, arms outstretched, cheeks pink from the cold. Kora clapped once, then dropped to her knees, laughing as the girl toppled into her arms. By February, Isaac had cleared enough of the north lot to start laying out the frame for the addition. Tom came by with a keg of nails, and they worked in the cold while Kora kept Lottie wrapped and watching from the porch. Isaac's hands cracked and his back ached from the digging, but each beam set in place felt like a promise made real. One evening, long after the sun had gone, Isaac found Kora at the table, drawing with charcoal on the back of a seed catalog. "What's that?" he asked, setting down the kindling. "Window placement. I want the morning light to fall on the cradle." He studied the lines, the care in her strokes. "You always draw like this." "I used to. Before I left Missouri, it helped settle my mind." He ran a finger along the edge of the page. "I like seeing your plans. Makes it easier to picture." She looked up. "I want this place to feel like it was made with intention, not just patched together." Isaac bent down, pressing a kiss to her temple. "It already does. That spring they planted a row of young trees along the southern fence. Kora said they'd be shade for Lottie when she was older, a place to sit and read." Isaac dug the holes while Kora tamped the soil, the girl toddling barefoot through the grass, hands full of dandelions. One afternoon, as they rested at the base of the hill, Kora leaned her head against Isaac's shoulder. "You think she'll ever wonder why she was left, maybe," he said, "but she'll never doubt where she belongs." Kora reached for his hand, fingers threading through his. "That's all I want." Isaac watched their daughter chasing bugs in the tall grass, her laugh rising like birdsong. "It's what she has." And with the sun warm on their backs and the scent of earth rising from the ground they'd turned together, there was nothing more to say. By early May, the creek had swollen with meltwater, and the air held that restless, waking scent of damp soil and new grass. Kora stood at the edge of the garden, squinting toward the ridge where Isaac was hammering the final joists into place. The addition had walls now, roof near finished, and she could already picture the cradle moved to the east window, where the light came soft through morning hours. Lottie sat beside her in the dirt, chewing a spoon and babbling at a beetle. Kora crouched and brushed her palm along the tilled row. "These'll be tomatoes if the frost holds off." Lottie replied with a long, unintelligible string of sounds, then promptly tipped over onto her side. Kora chuckled and scooped her up, brushing the dirt from her dress. That evening, as dusk settled across the fields, Isaac came in with sawdust in his hair, shoulders stiff. Kora was bent over the washbasin, sleeves damp to the elbow. "You eaten?" he asked, setting his tools by the door. "Not yet." "Was waiting on you." He stepped close and kissed her neck just below her ear, the place he'd learned made her pause even in motion. "I got the roof sealed," he murmured. "If it rains tonight, it'll hold." She leaned back into him. "You always work like the land's got a clock ticking behind it." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "Don't want the girl waking in a draft come autumn." She turned, drying her hands on a clean cloth. "You ever think about teaching her your trade?" "Carpentry, I mean. She's not even 2. Won't be long before she's asking what every tool in your belt does." He looked toward the cradle where Lottie was curled on her side, thumb in her mouth. "When she asks, I'll show her." After supper, they sat on the porch, knees touching. The frogs had started calling from the creek bed, and the air carried a soft coolness, welcome after the day's heat. Kora tucked her feet beneath her. "I had a letter from my cousin in Arkansas." Isaac turned toward her. She the one with the orchard. That's her. She says they're looking for someone to keep books and teach the younger children letters. Wants to know if I'd consider coming down. Isaac's mouth tightened for a moment, but he didn't speak. I told her no, Kora said, pressing her hand to his knee. Told her I already have a house and a family. He covered her hand with his own. You sure? This place feels like something I made with my own hands. That's not a feeling I'm willing to start from scratch again. He nodded, then looked toward the barn. I've been thinking about fencing the north pasture. Let the cattle stretch out more. You thinking of expanding, maybe? There's a young man over in Ellsworth, just finished serving with the Rangers, looking to work honest land. I was considering taking him on. Kora tilted her head. You trust him? I met him twice. He's green, but he listens. Reminds me of myself before I knew how to hold a hammer straight. She smiled gently, brushing her thumb over his knuckle. We could use another set of hands if you're sure. I'm sure, he said. I want this place to outlast us. The next morning, Isaac rode into town to meet the young man. Kora stayed behind, kneeling in the garden with Lottie napping under a linen canopy nearby. The soil was warm now, ready. She planted beans in even rows, the kind that climbed high if tended right. By the time Isaac returned, the sun had begun to dip low. A second horse followed his, and a boy no more than 20 rode behind him, hat in hand, eyes wide. Kora wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out to meet them. This here's Daniel, Isaac said. He'll be staying in the bunkhouse for now, Kora offered a nod. Welcome. Daniel bowed his head, voice quiet. Ma'am. Isaac helped him unload a single trunk, then showed him to the rear shed where they'd cleared space. That night, over cornbread and stew, Isaac said, he's a quiet one, but not afraid of work. Kora passed him the butter. He doesn't need to talk much, long as he pulls his weight. Isaac took her hand beneath the table, fingers warm against hers. By harvest, the addition was finished, and Lottie had learned to say both their names, though she called Kora Mamu, no matter how often it was corrected. The trees they'd planted along the fence had taken root, leaves small but healthy. Daniel built a second chicken run without being asked, and Kora caught him once showing Lottie how to hold a chick without squeezing. On a crisp October morning, Kora stood in the new room, watching light fall through the window onto the cradle. Isaac came in behind her, arms loose around her waist. I want to have another, she said. He breathed against her neck. You sure? She turned to face him. I'm more than sure. He kissed her gently, hands firm against her back. Then we will. The seasons turned again, and winter passed with less bite than the last. Lottie grew taller, louder, full of questions. Daniel stayed on, saving wages and writing letters to a girl back east. Kora taught 3 children from nearby ranches, lessons held at the kitchen table while Isaac worked the fields. In time, a second cradle joined the first. A boy, born in spring, with Kora's eyes and Isaac's quiet. Lottie named him Sam, though no one remembered why. Years went by. The orchard on the ridge began to bear fruit. The house never lost its warmth. And long after their hair had gone gray, long after Lottie had children of her own and Daniel had taken land nearby, Isaac and Kora still sat each evening on the porch, fingers twined, watching the sun fall over the fields they had built together. Whatever they had lost before, whatever grief had shaped them, it had all led here to a life made not of grand gestures, but of steady days and honest love. They never spoke of what might have been, only what was, and what was enough.